So if you'll remember, when we were working on this painting right here, I also started another painting. It was this one right here, which was much more free-formed, and that's the one that we're going to work on today. Now, when you're working on a watercolor painting, or an oil painting for that matter, it's oftentimes a really good idea to do more than one painting at a time, because there might be drying time involved, and you just don't want to have downtime. Okay. Now, before I begin, what I'd like to do is show you something about the tape job. Now, this one is all dry, and so you can see everything is very flat. That's just exactly how we want it to be. Now, if you'll remember, when I put the tape on, I told you that the action of the water would be very powerful, so you had to make sure that you got that tape on, halfway off. It was so important. You can see here where the tape has actually lifted away from the paper, right, as it was drawing and pulling and doing that stuff. So that way, when you're working in between sessions, and you go to restart, make sure that you put the tape down again, nice and firm, right? That's very important. The other thing was that when I put the tape on, I did it in parallel. In other words, I did not go like around, round, round, round like that. I did top and bottom, and side. Okay, that's important for a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons why it's important is because when you go to take the tape off, it's a lot cleaner and easier. Now, you would think that taking the tape off would be like really, sort of self-explanatory, but you'd be surprised. Okay, I think with this one, I'll start here. Remember, this is the one where I had that little tear in the paper, and I went ahead and, since this was just an exercise, I went ahead and just put a little piece of tape on there to preserve it. I'm not going to worry about that right there. Once again, if it was a finished one, I might just start over. What are you going to do? Right, if this was supposed to be like some sort of a really finished work. Anyways, but when I go to taking the rest of the tape off, you'll see that since I've done it in parallel, it'll be much easier. So important when you take your tape off to pull it away from your work. Once again, you would think that that was like super self-explanatory, but I've seen so many students do it, and heck, I've done it myself, where if you pull towards your work, not thinking about what you're doing, it will just rip your paper right through there, right? And just, and all your hard work will be ruined. So you want to take it off to the side, not down, definitely not over, right? And just to the side, nice and easy, pulling, pulling, pulling. And you'll see that will come off nice and clean. And because it's parallel, what it is that that piece was totally on top, and it doesn't pull on these corners here at the top or at the bottom. Same thing with this side over here. You know that this side is on top because you did them in parallel. So you can just start with this corner, definitely pulling away from your work. And that way, if it catches anything, the worst it can do is tear out a little bit this way. And that's okay because, work really should be framed, especially paperwork. And so this little white part that's left on the paper here, this is going to be just covered up by your frame anyways. Okay, so I'll just pull that ever so gently away from my work. And once again, when I get to the bottom, it's just going to pull off nice and clean. Isn't that nice, right? Coming up here, same sort of thing that I can just pull away. Now, I'm going to hold down this corner. You got to be careful, right? You got to be careful when you're taking your tape off. That's that weak spot. That's that tear. And what I'd probably do is repair that. I'll show you that in just a second. But I'll go ahead. I'll pull that away. And it comes off nice and clean. Same thing over here. So easy, right? And so now now my work is free, it's good, it's not been torn. I think right away what I would do with this is I would just take a nice clean piece of tape and go ahead and just put it on the back. Just like so. What are we going to do about that? There we go. And so then, maybe just a little bit more. The edge there. Then I could even just take and just fake this in right here. If I really had liked this work and it was, well, you know, I could probably get away with that, just painting a little bit right there. Okay, cool. So now we're going to start the other painting, but this time I think we're going to start it from scratch. I'm not going to go ahead and use this one. I didn't like the way the tape was lifted off. It had been a while since I worked on it, etc., etc. So we're just going to go ahead and start from scratch with this one. Of course, take all your old scrap, just ball it up, and throw it away right away. Okay, so now this painting, as I've said before, is going to be a lot looser. It has nothing to do with perspective. Hopefully, you've learned the lessons that I've had to teach you with perspective. So here I've just drawn some koi fish, and just like before, you can see, if you look really closely, that there's a lot of underdrawing here, just a lot of scribbling going on, right, where I was kind of just working out my designs. And did I look at koi fish? Yeah, I looked at some koi fish on the internet, but it's my own drawing, and I think that that's really important to do your own original work. We're going to do a unit on copying a picture from a picture. I think we'll do that next, actually. But for now, let's just, be free, be fun, be a little creative. Now, for this video, I've gone over this with Sharpie, but also it was a good way of transferring this. That's another thing that we're going to be talking about in future lessons, is how to transfer an image, right? Well, this drawing paper that we're using for our watercolor is thin enough that when I put that heavy Sharpie on here, and I put this over it, that I can see through to it. And so this time, instead of drawing really heavy lines like I've done with the other watercolors with the perspective, I'm going to do this more like, well, an actual watercolor painting. In other words, I'm going to draw very lightly. Okay, so you can kind of see the fish now, right? Take one last peek. There they are. Because when I draw light now, you're probably not going to see them. Okay, cool. So here we go. I've got my fish. It's all good. And here we go. I'm using a regular old number 2HB pencil for this, because this is just for the classroom. But if I was doing this at home, I would probably use a much harder pencil. And one of these days, maybe I'll do a tutorial on the different types of pencils, but that day is not today. And so for now, just know that they do have harder pencils, and the harder pencil is going to show less. Okay, so I've got my image transferred. So I'm going to go ahead and take this paper out and tape this on. So remember, I've got good tape control, and it is halfway on, halfway off, and nice and flat and nice and firm down. It's super duper important, the tape job that you do, right? Okay, so my paper is nice and flat. I'm going to go ahead and put this last piece of tape on here. And just a couple things. One is that if you're an artist, then don't shy away from many different experiences. So for instance, one of the reasons why I hold taping in such high regard and know that it's so important is because I've done other jobs such as automotive paint and also house contracting. And so I know that that tape is super duper important. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that there was nothing special about this tape. This is just, what is this, Power Plus. I got it at like the 99-cent store. It will work just fine. And for the classroom, that kind of thing is a must. Not to worry about getting supplies that are just, way too expensive. Okay, so here we go. We've got this all taped down, and I've got my water right here. And I've got my big old brush right here. Doesn't matter. This one would be fine too. But a bigger brush for doing a wash. And I'm going to go ahead and just wash this down. Nice clean brush. And just everywhere, everywhere. But I'm not soaking the paper out totally. If you had a regular watercolor paper, you might even go through a process where you do what's called stretching. And I can talk about that some other time. But it's where you would soak the water paper down, the watercolor paper, and I mean all the way, like run it underneath the faucet at your sink, right? And then you would put it onto a stretcher board. Hopefully, what would be really cool is if I can build a little stretcher board that I can use for the classroom. That makes it really easy for students to use. And so then students that are serious about doing watercolor could do just that. Okay, so as you could see, I dipped what, I don't know, I think 3 times or something like that on here. Everything's covered. Good enough. Don't over soak this paper. It's really important. Okay, so next thing, let's get the paints. Well, let's be honest. Well, I can't believe it. I did not turn on the recorder when I was doing this. So after I taped it, all I did was put down a little layer of water everywhere, everywhere. Now, it was only about 3 dips of water on this little paintbrush right here to cover the whole thing, because you got to be careful not to overstress your paper, because it's not watercolor paper, right? And then I went ahead and I just was dipping into my blue, and continued to use a little bit of water, made a nice little puddle right here, and my blue, it's nice and clean right here. Started around the edges because that's where the darkest part was, and then worked in towards my fish, right? And when I did the fish, you can see that I've got them right up to, in fact, into the bodies of the fish, right? All along the edges. I haven't left what I refer to as the magical white line. So when I say the magic white line, maybe you're confused and you don't know exactly what I'm talking about. Well, so for instance, if you were to look like, let's say over here, you can see the line of the fin drawn right here. And what the students would do is that instead of going all the way up to it, they would come up and, just get kind of close-ish to where it's at, thus leaving this sort of magical lighter area around it, usually white, right? It's usually the white of the paper, so that's the magic white line. And we'd want to avoid that. Okay, so this paper here, actually, I was just quitting when I saw, oh no, I hadn't even started the recording. That's silly old Mr. Kuhn. But, so it's getting stressed out, I'd say, and a little bit of stress is okay on this because it's going to look kind of cool, actually. It's going to give it a little bit of an effect. But this is where I would stop, because remember, we were making this one, right, while we were also working on this, right? So while this one was drying, we were doing the sky or something like that. And then we couldn't take this one any further, so we started working on this one, right? And so by now, this one, probably dry, right? So you could go back to it, or it's the end of the day and it's time to clean up or something like that. But I wouldn't do this anymore. At least give it a few minutes, right? Even if I just gave it like 10 minutes, I could probably go back to it. In fact, I'm going to watch the clock now and see, and I'll come back in about 10 minutes and see if I can start working into this again. Okay, so I've let this sit for about 10 minutes, not too long, and you can see it's still kind of wrinkly, right? But I think I'm going to be able to work into it now. Now, if this was the end of the period and you'd come back to it and it was all dry, that'd be fine too. No problem. Okay. So I'm starting with the same old brush. It still even has the same old blue on it. And yeah, a little bit more blue, a little stronger blue. Let's see if we can just add a little bit more intensity to the colors. Now, especially maybe around the edges. We're going to start where it is going to be nice and dark. And the fact that this is not totally dry yet is kind of a plus because it means that I can kind of blend things in. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm doing water. You do what you want to do. I mean, just because, once again, man, come on. Just because I'm doing fish doesn't mean you do fish. You do you. You do, I don't know, do flowers, do pony, do, I don't know, Goku. Do whatever it is that you want to do, right? But I do suggest maybe something that's just kind of free and easy, just to kind of bust out of the whole, like, very tight linear perspective thing that we've been doing, right? Okay, time to loosen up a little bit. And so you can see I keep adding paint to that because I want the color to be a little bit more intense now. So, of course, I'm going to use more paint, less water, right? And you can see it's getting a little bit darker. And where am I doing it? I'm doing it mostly around the edges. Am I being super careful? No. In fact, I'm being like purposefully messy. Am I avoiding the fish? No. Here, bam, there's a fish, right? Get it right in there. It does not matter. I don't want the magic white line around everything. Okay, I think I want this even so a little bit darker, a little bit darker. Okay. And those little areas, those are going to blend in just fine as they do their little watercolory thing. Okay. Okay. And as I do it, I think that I don't want to make it too, like just corners, that kind of thing. I want to have it go ahead and have some unpredictability, some motion to it. So maybe I'll do this corner a little bit less. Maybe I'll bring the water up here. Whatever. Just a little bit. Okay. So you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to work into another compatible color here. I'm going to work into purple. Now, this watercolor set has purple, and I could use red, but I think for my purposes here, using that secondary color that comes with the watercolor, why not, right? And I'll go ahead and I'll use the purple that came with it. See, because sometimes when you mix a purple using the blue and the red, especially the blue and the red that comes with a set like this, you'll get a very dark purple. And maybe I don't want it to be that dark. Okay. So here we go. Ooh, just look at that. It's doing its watercolory thing now as that purple just sort of goes wherever the heck it wants to. I mean, I kind of place it, but then it just spreads and has a little mind of its own. And that's cool. That's exactly what I want it to do. And I'm not going to put that purple everywhere. No, just some places. Some places, wherever I think it's just kind of cool, wherever it's kind of striking me. And before I get too carried away, maybe that's enough purple. See, and here where it's lighter, what I'll do, see, I hadn't hit that already with anything. I'll just hit it with a little bit of water. Boom, 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 boom. And that way it can stay light and yet still blend. And I can hit this with water again because, well, I let it rest for a little bit. I could even hit this with a little bit of water if I wanted to, just kind of make things happen a little bit. And if I want to, another thing that I can do is I can just take and if I squeeze the water out of the brush, right, just squeeze it out, dry it off, paper towel, whatever, get the water out of there, I can also lift up and look at that. You see, I can take a lot of the color out. So I've squeezed the water out again. There. And get some more effects. If I find something that's got too harsh of an edge, I can go in there and work it again. But, I don't mind. I don't mind if some places have a harsher edge and some places are smoother. I wanted to do it. It's kind of like crazy watercolory thing. Okay. So another color that goes really well with blue is, of course, green, right? Because with the purple, it was red and blue that would make purple, even though we used the purple out of the thing. And in here, it'd be yellow and blue that would make the green, right? And so with a nice clean brush, a new area, and this green is, pretty fakey. If I was doing trees, I probably would not use this green, right? But for here, and the fact that it's going to mix with this blue, then it's like, it could be kind of cool. And so let's just see what happens, just to add a little bit more interest. Think about it. I know, I know kids, right? And they would just go ahead and they would just do blue, because blue's blue, water's blue, and then that's that, right? But this is an art class, right? So do it up a little bit and make things a little bit more interesting, right? By adding some depth to your colors. And experiment a little bit, what the heck? Lighten up a little bit. It's an art class, right? Get a little crazy. This is not math. Okay. So there we go. There's a little bit of that green in there. Maybe just a little bit here. And once again, I've gone around my fish here and I've gotten a little bit into the fish, but I'm not protecting the edges too much. And but at the same time, I have left these fish mostly white because I might want to do something totally different in there. Okay, so cool. That's about as far as I can take that water there for now. That'd be nice. That'd be nice. Maybe a little bit more water just right here, just so it can blend and do its thing and, break up a little pattern. Is that good? Sure enough. Good enough. Good enough. Okay. And so now, at this point, definitely if the class is over, great. It's a good time to end. Otherwise, I'd probably go work on something else because I think what I want to do now is I want to go ahead and let this dry a little bit. So actually, I've changed my mind. Before we let this totally dry, I am going to work into it a little bit because what's going to happen is as I work into these fish, it is going to blur a little bit, blend a little bit with what I've got going on here. I think that's going to be cool though because it's going to add a little bit more life to what I'm doing. Okay. Then I will let it dry because I want to show you another technique, a wet into wet technique. But for now, okay, let's go for it. Let's get a little crazy here. So I think, okay, I thought about it for a second. Well, what color am I going to do the fish? I think I'll do one more purple and one more orange, right? It has to do with the whole warm, cool thing that I've got going on. But we'll talk about that some other day. I think I want to switch my brush though to a more medium-sized brush. Okay, so instead of that big wash brush, I'm going to use this knife edge one right here. And hopefully it's nice and clean and oh, looks pretty good. But actually, I don't think I want to start with my orange. I want to start with the purple. Okay, so I'm going to get this purple over here and make some decisions about how I'm going to do this. Now, the fish is a form, right? So I think what I'll do is I'll think about, well, where's the light coming in? I'm going to have the light mostly coming in from the top. So if I get it a little bit darker towards the bottom, that will be okay. And my little bit darker area, that is always the good place to start because it's already a little bit stronger than what I think I want it, right? And that's okay because I can mess around with it here. Okay, so there. And yeah, it's still stronger. I want this to be pretty light right here. Okay, here. And here's the other fin here. Because I want it to blend in with the water a little bit, to tell you the truth on this one. But I want it to stay pretty light. Okay. So as I work it there, here, And here in its tail, I want this to stay pretty light, right? So I just squeezed some of the water out of my paintbrush, squeezing it out, drying it off. And then, I can come in here and you see I can remove the water, but it's really nice. I can use this technique kind of in the same way that I could use the technique of the eraser when I was working with pencil. Okay, so let me see. I want to soften. I didn't want that really super hard edge there, so I want to soften that up. So I just add a little bit more water back into my brush. Okay, and I'm just kind of outlining, if nothing else, some of the drawing here, because I don't want it to get too dark yet, but I do want to define it. I want to get those edges a little bit defined. As they go into that water, that's all good. Once again, I'm using my technique, taking some of the water out, especially while it's nice and wet. Yeah, soften up these edges a little bit, add a little bit more water into there. Once again, I want that to blend in with my water that's surrounding it. So in here it wasn't blending as much as I'd like it to, so I'm going to push it right into that wetness there, because I wanted this edge to be soft, almost blurry. And that's why I'm doing this now instead of waiting for it to dry, is because I want that blurriness, right? Let's take advantage of the special properties that watercolor has. If I was in my ceramics class, I'd be talking about making a relationship with the clay. But the thing is, that's absolutely true of paint as well. You want to create a relationship with your paint and know what it can do, what it can't do, how to work it, how to manipulate it, right? Oh, that sounds a little bit too much like a relationship. But no, but seriously, you got to see its qualities. Wait, that sounds like a relationship too. Anyway, so there it is. That's what I wanted. I wanted sort of a nice, soft, blurry edge to that fish, but it's also starting to define it a little bit. Okay, so rinsing that off, and let's go for it. So this is going to be the orange one. This is going to be quite the contrast. And the orange, that's a special warm, cool color combination. We've talked about primaries a little bit, and in the next lessons, we're gonna get to this whole color thing for real, right? But right now, we're just we're dipping our toes in a little bit, getting a little bit wet, and learning a little bit. So, like for last time, we talked about primaries, and we talked about complementary colors a little bit when I was doing the other paintings, the harmonious colors. So in other words, we had the primaries, red, yellow, and blue. We had the harmonious colors, so when things were next to each other on the color wheel. So in other words, we could take and make a purple, which would be next to a blue or a red. Those could also be considered your secondaries there. All right. And then when we went to making browns, we used complementary colors. All right. It's a little bit. Once again, I'll do that very formally in the lessons that are coming up. But for right now, just know that there are special color combinations that you can do. And one of them is a warm cool. And that's what we're doing here, really, is we're using these warm colors to sort of contrast, not complement. When I say complement a color, that's a really specific term. That's talking about colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. but to complement each other, I guess. In other words, something that's just going to work well together. It's going to be bold and striking. Okay. And here. And here. Okay. And soften it up a little bit. Maybe even erase out a little bit. So soften it with water and erasing out a little bit with a dry brush. Okay, and soften it and also erase it out a little bit. And cool. That is about what I wanted to have happen here. Maybe a little bit more. I want that to blend into this blue here. So a little bit more there. A little bit more there. Anywhere else. A little bit more on this edge here. And here. And you see how that's blending? See, that's the watercolor. That's my relationship. Like coming out there, knowing what it's going to do. And that is, I think, pretty much what I want it to do. Maybe a little bit more here. See, I'm also starting to build form. You see how I've got this darker, darker here, a little darker here. So, you know, there's a little bit of randomness to it. I'm trying to keep things fresh. But there's also a little bit of that form taken over. Okay. Now that, I think, is enough. Okay. So now I am going to let it dry. And I'm going to show you a wet and wet watercolor technique next.